want to welcome everyone today. We're going to be talking about how you can really gain visibility around the end-to-end user experience if you're using Citrix or even VMware Horizon. And then how do you document and report on some of those key performance metrics around the end user activity, around system performance, so that you can proactively address issues before they even happen. Now, before we jump in, I do want to do a quick housekeeping. You have myself today on this webinar. My name's Stacy Leidwinger, and I'm with the marketing department here at Goliath. You also have Yemi Lady Jew, who's our senior technical consultant, and he's going to be walking through some of the technology that really can deliver the visibility you need to address end user performance issues. In terms of agenda, I'm going to go through a very short set of introductory slides to just frame the challenges that we're going to talk about today. And then we're going to go into focused user stories and really identify some of the challenges that many organizations like yourselves have faced over time and how leveraging a purpose-built tool to drive that visibility solve those pain points for them. If you have any questions today, please submit them in the Q&A box. We will probably get to most of them at the end, but we will try to answer throughout. One question I always get is, will we receive the recording? Yes. Within the next 24 hours, you'll have a recording of this webinar in your inbox that you can share with others. In order to level set, I did want to give just a little bit of background in terms of Goliath and who we are. So for Goliath, we help every one of these organizations on the screen you see today provide end user experience monitoring and troubleshooting across their Citrix or VMware Horizon environment, regardless where end users or workloads are located. It's with our embedded intelligence that our clients tell us that when they start using Goliath, it's as if they've hired 2 full-time troubleshooting experts that is available 365 by 24 by 7 days a week without a lunch break. They consider the ability to have these proactive alerts around common thresholds, common issues, common failure points, so they can proactively address them, which ultimately delivers a better user experience for their entire user base. As you can see, we work across industries. We scale both with technology as well as price points to meet both small and large organizations. And I know we have some from the healthcare industries on the phone today. We do have a focus in healthcare. We're known often as the healthcare IT standard. And the reason for that is we understand the specific pain points that come within the healthcare IT industry. We recognize that you often have less resources, less budget than your enterprise counterparts. And if there's an issue when it comes to performance, it directly correlates or impacts patient care. For this, we have purpose-built modules across all major EHR systems, Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, Meditech, and we can go ahead and drive that visibility across not only end user behavior and the overall infrastructure, but also across those EHR systems. So with that intro, I'm going to jump into some of the pain points that we hear. And I'd say some of these pain points around visibility has been magnified with the surge of remote working because of COVID. And so many of you on the phone probably are being inundated on a daily basis of people asking, are our teams being effective when they're working remotely? Do we know if they have a good user experience? Do we know what the experience is? What's the average logon time? Do they have access to all the applications they needed? I know we did a performance project 3 months ago. Are we seeing results from that? Do we have enough back-end systems, enough capacity to support the surge of remote workers that are going on? Do we have enough storage? When there is an issue, is the issue with Citrix? Is it with the network? Is it with storage? Is it because of the end user? These questions are coming to you day in and day out. And without a strong purpose-built tool, it's really hard to answer. And here's why it's so hard to answer when you look at the Citrix and VMware infrastructures. The reason it's hard to answer is it's not delivering just one piece of technology. In order to deliver that overall workspace experience, you need to get almost 15 or more vendors, technologies to work in tandem and deliver this high-performing user experience. And not only is it difficult because of the technologies that have to work together, the other difficulty is end user activity and behavior. So when more and more of your users are working remotely, you have more and more variability on how that workspace is being delivered and utilized. What I mean is each of your users have its own endpoint. They all are accessing your applications in Citrix in a different way. Some may be back in the office. Some might be working from home. Some might be using public Wi-Fi. Because of this variability, already before you even touch your Citrix infrastructure, issues can go wrong. And if you don't have visibility into those endpoints and behavior, it becomes really difficult to troubleshoot. So now you finally have the delivery infrastructure, let's say around Citrix. So you've got your NetScaler, your storefront, your brokering service, your applications. Again, if you're healthcare, you have EHR applications. If you're manufacturing, you might have program management like an Oracle P6. All of this is being delivered through that virtualized application and desktop environment. To deliver that, you have to access your backend systems, your licensing server, profile servers, Active Directory. Below that, you have your hypervisor layer that is standing all of this up, often from a different provider. So when it comes time and a user says, my logon is slow, I can't log on, my EHR application won't show, my Cisco softphone calls are dropping, my Teams calls are dropping, it is any point in this complex environment that an issue could happen. And if you don't have visibility, it makes answering all those questions I spoke about earlier that much harder. And so this is really at the heart of what Elias offers, and what we're going to show you today is we bring all of this together in a single end-to-end view so that you can go ahead and correlate information from the endpoint, from the end user behavior, their internet connection, from the delivery infrastructure of Citrix or VMware, as well as all the way through the back-end data center. And we're going to provide you tools that allow you to not only drill in and isolate root cause when performance issues happen, but we're also going to provide intelligence and automation that allow you to proactively alert on those thresholds so you can address issues before end users are ever impacted. And so when you look at a solution that is purpose-built to give you this visibility and report on these dynamics, you really need to make sure that you have the right tools that are going to anticipate issues before they occur, that are going to give you broad and deep metrics so that you can drill in and isolate root cause of performance issues very quickly and resolve them. And then you want to be able to document. So you want to have enough data that you can share it with other teams. Maybe it's the network team, the storage team, perhaps it's the end user themselves, to help them understand why they're having an issue and how you need to potentially help. We can also integrate within third-party applications. And then you want to be able to enhance that data with reports. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this document piece, because this is really critical when you look at gaining visibility and really measuring key performance indicators. And for organizations that look at this holistically and really start to not only narrow down when performance issues happen, but really start to anticipate in order to prevent in the future, this is when our clients see the magic happen. And they really transform holistically from a reactive to a proactive IT team. And so today, part of what we're focusing on is really driving that visibility and how you can use data to more efficiently talk to your counterparts, management, other vendors, and end users so that you can solve issues and you can prevent them in the future. And so when we talk about documentation and data, and think about this when you see the demonstrations today, think about how you can use this information inside your organization, right? You want to be able to share it with all those teams I just mentioned, and you can do that easily through exports such as PDF, Excel, CSV files. You want to be able to email it. You maybe want to be able to print it. You might just simply want to be able to take a screenshot and alter it up so you can show someone exactly when pinpoint and isolate that end user issue. You also want to integrate into third-party applications like a ServiceNow or Sharewell so that you can embed it in the processes of, for example, your help desk team. Or maybe you want to integrate it with like a Splunk or a Microsoft System Center so that you can have it part of your event management program. And finally, you want to be able to enhance that data. And we're going to give you examples of some of this later on, where you can actually go ahead and export out-of-the-box reports so you can analyze it. Or you can integrate that data into third-party visualization tools like a Power BI, a Tableau, even Microsoft Excel. So when you're thinking about how do I solve and isolate any type of issue, root cause that are causing performance issues, you also have to think more holistically on how are you going to use that data to make sure that that permanent fix has been instituted and that you have processes in place that you can prevent them from ever impacting end users again. And so when we look at data, and we're going to go through use cases here in a minute, one of the things that you want to think about is what type of data is really important to drive that visibility. Our clients tell us it's often in one of these three buckets. It's either around end user performance, looking at log-on duration. Can I keep my log-ons under 30 seconds? I hear that day in and day out from customers. Connection speed with the internet, latency. When you look at end user activity, especially with remote workers, we're getting a lot more questions to see, can my users really adapt to home working? How productive are they when they're working from their home office? What's peak usage so I can think about capacity planning? What applications are being used? Do I have enough licenses? And then it's that overall system performance. And when I say system performance, I'm talking end to end. Everything that you saw from the Citrix delivery infrastructure all the way back into the hypervisor layer, Active Directory. Do you have enough of these resources to support the user experience that you're trying to deliver based on the roles of your users, based on the applications that they're using? And so with that, moving on to the next slide. What we're going to walk through so you can see a lot of what I just spoke to is how to gain visibility in some of the most common scenarios we see and hear from our clients. The first is I need real-time data to quickly troubleshoot a performance issue my end users are having. Second, I need historical insights into end user activity. I want to know how has productivity changed or altered with the surge of remote workers. And then again, how can I prevent performance issues from ever happening? Because one time we had an application out and that cost us significant money and time and negatively impacted our customers. That can never happen again. So I'm going to talk through how you can gain and leverage data to fulfill each of these three challenges that some of you today might be having. And to do that, I'm going to walk through case studies because I think the best way to really understand the value and how this potentially could work in your organization is to hear how others have done it. So our first case study is really about using data in order to reduce log-on times. So we had a hospital in the Midwest. Their clinicians were complaining often took over 2 minutes. They kept complaining that Epic, which was their EHR system, was slow. And they didn't know if it was Epic, they didn't know if it was Citrix. Regardless, it was negatively impacting the way that they could provide patient care. And what happened is there was a lot of finger pointing across the organization. You know, there was a different team that owned Citrix, a different applications team for Epic, the network team. Everyone said, our systems look great, it's not our fault, right? And there was no data to really provide visibility into what was causing the problem. And so they went ahead and they leveraged Goliath to get that end-to-end view and really be able to isolate what was causing some of these performance issues. And it wasn't one thing per se, but multiple things. For example, they were able to drill down and see that many users had an old driver map to their GPOs. That driver had been decommissioned months ago, but it was still in their GPOs, which meant that it was making the logon experience really long. And we were able to go ahead and isolate that in 2 clicks. So with that, Amy, why don't you walk us through how this customer and others have really been able to use data to solve that challenge of long logon times?
Yeah, absolutely. And so in that scenario, you know, when they deploy the technology, typically the first spot, the first place in the technology that they look to try and get that objective information about the user sessions would be the screen that I have up right now, which is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Session Display. This is where all of the sessions in the environment will populate. And here you will be able to see the users on the left-hand side of the screen, session information and things like that. You have a custom search section here at the top that allows you to go back and pull sessions. So here, I'm actually displaying sessions for the last 15 days. By default, it'll be sessions from today, but you can go back and view sessions with the same amount of granularity as a session from today, which really means that we don't average or roll up any information, and you can then check or look at sessions with the same amount of granularity to see if there are any changes that have occurred in the environment that may be causing issues today that may not have been causing issues, you know, in the past. So in this particular sort of customer environment, what they would then do is once they pulled up all of the sessions that are relevant, they now can do a quick filter here at the top right-hand side of the screen to identify a user, identify a delivery group or machines. People might want to identify which users are connecting in via thin clients or which users are connecting in via Macs. You have that quick filter functionality here to identify those sessions quickly so that you can then click on the session and now get a pop-up of about 7 or 8 tabs, depending on what's configured, that basically breaks down every single thing that went into the user's session in one single pane of glass. So that by the time you have sort of gone through any one of these tabs, you have the ability to come up with answers very quickly for this individual user session. What's causing the problem? Why is that an issue? And here is the data to prove that. So when you first click on a user session, and in this case, this health system clicks on the session, they start off here with this summary tab. And what this summary tab does is it basically, as the name implies, summarizes the rest of the tabs here, pulling in some key metrics so that you can either come up with quick answers or you are directed to the tab that has the information. Now, there's a lot of things going on here in the summary tab. For instance, you can see here that single view here of all of the infrastructure components that actually contributed to this user session. Their endpoint machine, the delivery controller or storefront server that was involved, all the way down to the hypervisor host that was supporting the VM that supported this user session. And in this case, we're looking specifically for logon issues or at logon issues. So in this case, this health system would just click here on logon summary, get directed to this logon duration tab that really breaks down everything that went into the user's logon. What went on during brokering stages at the delivery controller, things like drive mapping, printer mapping, logon scripts, session creation time from an infrastructure perspective. And over here on the right-hand side, you can actually see everything that went into it from Citrix Receiver. And this is without deploying any technology to the user's endpoint. We're able to see things like how long the ICA file download took, or how long it took to establish the micro VPN connection. How long did it take for the receiver startup processes to actually sort of present the session? And we do this again without deploying any technology there to the endpoint, so that you can quickly identify if there are any receiver related issues impacting the brokering and the creation of the session. And then if you look here at the bottom section of the screen, we're able to break down what's happening now at the session host, where you can see sort of the brokering and client validation, server validation times. You can expand the authentication section, where you can now see what OUs this user is a part of, what domain controller was in charge of authenticating the session, how long it took for those LDAP calls to take place. And drilling further into the GPO section, you can see that we break out each individual group policy down to the policy name and how long each one took to execute in this customer's environment. So if there is an issue, there is a problem with group policies, you're able to quickly identify the policy that's causing the issues and sort of escalate and drill into that, as opposed to spending time looking through the different consoles and all of the different areas that impact group policies in a Citrix session to find these answers. So going back to this health system, what they were able to do is they were able to see a specific drive mapping policy right here that was adding, because this drive was actually decommissioned, was adding a bunch of times to the logon. There's actually a timeout that was taking place because that couldn't find that drive. That was sort of significantly adding times to the environment. So they were able to expand this, quickly find that, remove that policy, and cut down their logon times substantially. We actually have screenshots of that customer environment just to really give you an understanding of how valuable this was to this particular health system. So they sort of went through the same workflow that I just did, where they looked at the session. They were able to quickly point to, okay, this is a really bad logon time. Most of that's within the profile load. And on drilling into group policies, they were able to see that there was a specific drive map that was wrong, or mapping to a drive that was decommissioned. They removed that, and then they saved a ton of time in their logon process. Now, so that's sort of the first step, right? Seeing all of the data, using it to troubleshoot issues, and keeping all of this historically. The next thing that customers, especially this health system, wanted to do was to document the improvements in the environment as they make these changes. So our technology is really equipped with a number of different ways to export and sort of transform the data as needed to be able to show changes in the environment, to prove that these particular servers or these particular components need to be decommissioned, so on and so forth. So right now what I have on the screen is an example of one of these sort of mechanisms, which is our log-on duration report. Now we saw all of the data that we collect within the log-on process, and that data then drives these reports. So you can hear this example report breaks down all of the users in the environment, of course, breaks down their log-on times, and then the different sections of the log-on time to see, okay, what has improved over time, as well as giving IT an idea of what else needs to be implemented. Maybe I need to implement different profile management software, or maybe I need to implement different tools or decommission a host because that host actually has sessions that are that have long desktop load or interactive session time. So this allows IT to not only make those sort of decisions, but to show improvements and show management what they have done to improve the environment as a whole. This is one example of sort of our out-of-the-box reports. But as I mentioned, our customers have the ability to sort of transform these alerts or these reports as well. And here's an example of one of that, where one of our customers wanted to identify log-on times based on location, but still have the ability to show the different stages of the log-on time. So here, I think this was a Power BI report, leveraging some of our templates and views that we have into our database so that they were able to pull this up and have this being sent out to management and so on and so forth. So the data is there, and then we use the data to sort of document and have these trends and show trends of improvements or anything else, or justify any fix actions in the environment. So we've been able to leverage the data, been able to document the data, and now it's time to input or to be able to anticipate issues before they happen, leveraging this data. And that's where our customers will flip over to they would leverage our out-of-the-box capabilities with embedded intelligence and automation. And the view that really sort of epitomizes that is this one, which is our automatic discovery and dependency map for Citrix. So as the name implies, this will automatically discover all of the components that contribute to Citrix in the environment. It will then map them out and then apply over 300 monitoring rules to the environment. It's going to be monitoring for conditions, failure points, thresholds, events that actually can cause end user experience issues they're not taken care of. These monitoring rules then drive the heat map structure that's sort of present in the screen. So as issues take place on any one of these components, they start to turn red or orange, depending on the severity. And then you can click on the components and identify what's actually driving those problems. So in the case of log-on duration here, let's say, for instance, you're having connection failures or poor resource utilization on a delivery controller or domain controller that actually can cause problems, the technology will automatically alert you to that and then drive this sort of knock screen so that you can quickly identify those issues and go ahead and solve them. So that's sort of this view, but keep in mind there are many different views here. So I can drill down into the delivery layer, and now I get a logical breakdown of the environment. I can see the delivery controllers, delivery groups, machine catalogs, gold images, if those are available. And on clicking on any one of these delivery groups, I now get a machine infrastructure build out where it gives me user experience metrics on the right-hand side for all of the different components here. So I can track it back track user experience like logon duration, ICA latency, network latency, to a delivery group, to a machine catalog, even down to the hypervisor host in the environment. So if I'm having a host, if there's a host in my environment that has poor user experience on it, technology will alert me to that, and I can see it here in this knock view and be able to justify the management or justify those fix actions, either to decommission this machine, but ultimately the most important thing is being able to be aware of these things before users start to call in and complain about these sort of issues. So with that, that's sort of the way that we're able to leverage the data to troubleshoot issues, then document them, and then put in, leverage the embedded intelligence and automation of the technology to be able to anticipate these issues before users are actually impacted by them. So with that, I'll pass it over to Stacy, and we can talk about the next sort of criteria.
Thank you, Yemi. And so our next user story really is very different from the one Yemi just shared. That was all about leveraging data to troubleshoot and prevent specific performance issues. The next user story has really come up significantly with the surge of remote working. And what happens is we had a customer, Empire Office, they came to us and they really said, we'd like to understand how this work from home is impacting our end users. They're a family-owned business. They had 2 floors in Manhattan, and they wanted to know, can our users be productive? Do they have the right access to the right applications? Is they're schooling their kids at home having impact on their ability to perform what they need to do on a day-to-day basis? And there was a lot of concern, even from a mental health understanding, can they be productive in this new environment, and how are they adapting? So no one was looking to be Big Brother, but they were looking to understand how has work styles changed and evolved given the pandemic that's going on. And so they leveraged Goliath to really understand within their Citrix sessions, how active were users? When were they active? When were they logging in? When were they disconnecting? Were they accessing the applications they needed to access in order to be productive? And what they found out is there was no normal workday. Users were coming online even sooner. They were starting their day at 6:30, 7 a.m. They also were sometimes taking a break midday, and many suspected this is when they were homeschooling their kids when school was still in session. And then they would see that they get back on and work late in the evening. In fact, they found that many of their workers were working more hours and being more productive while at home. And in fact, they needed to talk about people taking a break and making sure that they were getting the right balance between work and home, given everything that was going on. But in order to make these decisions and really understand when is it safe to go back to work, and are we doing the things that we need to do to make sure that we're continuing to move the business forward, organizations are looking for this visibility, and they need to be able to see it across groups. Some groups work really well remote. For example, back office and accounts payable, right? Those are often jobs that can be done more remotely. Even in this example, some of the designers, they were really struggling. Yes, they had access to the applications, but they were used to doing it in a more collective group. They were able to go to the whiteboard. They were able to share ideas. And so they were able to see also how this is impacting different groups, which would allow them to stagger going back to the office and make the right decisions for the organization. Yemi, do you want to show a little bit about the user productivity report and how some of the metrics are highlighting and how organizations are using it today?
Absolutely. Yeah, and see, that is really good job breaking down, how exactly this is used by our customers. So this is the aforementioned Citrix virtual apps and desktops end user productivity report. And this is going to break down the users on the left-hand side of the screen. It's breaking down what IP address they're connecting in from, what infrastructure they use to connect into the environment, the start and end dates of their sessions, and of course, this is sort of the current session state at the time of this report being run. Typically, customers run this on a daily basis, just so they can get an understanding of what the day-to-day usage of the environment is. But keep in mind that could be, that can definitely be adjusted, maybe a week, a month, and so on and so forth. So as sort of you see fit, very customizable. And then here are some of the metrics that are really, really important to understanding the user's works and the user's sort of activity, and their sort of standard workflow and workday. So you can see the duration of their session here, the amount of time that they were interacting with the environment. So not just, moving the mouse every 15 minutes or playing a video and then walking away or just leaving the machine. But this is sort of the amount of time that we're able to determine that they are interacting and actually being productive inside of their Citrix session. And we have this for virtual desktops as well. And then you can see here the time, conversely, that they are inactive inside of their session. You get an interaction percentage. And finally, you get what we call a max inactivity time. Is going to be the maximum amount of time that they took a break or that they weren't active inside of their session. And this is very helpful in identifying, again, how users work in the environment. As Stacy mentioned, many users, especially with Empire Office, were taking 2 to 3 hours, we're having 2 to 3 hours of max inactivity because they went to, make lunch or something for their children, homeschool them, do other sort of household things, but then get back on the environment and work till later on in the day, or log in later on or earlier on in the morning to be able to identify this. So not only just being able to say, okay, this user has or has not been working, but this report has been used to drive business decisions on how to reopen and how to improve the environment to be able to support the changing needs of remote users, of their remote users. So with that, Stacy, I'll pass it over to you and we can talk about the next user story.
Great, thank you, Yemi. And now our third story, we've kind of talked about how you can use data to troubleshoot, how you can understand end user activity. The next is, how do you prevent issues from even happening and impacting your end users? So we worked with a health system. They have offices across, I think, 20 different states. They happen to use Cerner Millennium as their EHR application. And what they were doing prior to Goliath is they had IT admins going into different locations at 5 in the morning, launching Citrix, accessing Cerner Millennium through it, and making sure all of the applications they needed, all the clinical apps, all the office productivity tools were launching effectively, because they didn't want to have a risk of an outage happening. As you can imagine, that's very manual. It can also be very flawed, and hospitals don't actually shut down. So just going in at 5 a.m. didn't mean you were going to prevent an outage. It just meant you might prevent an outage at peak time. And so they worked with us, and what we were able to do is deliver ongoing continuous testing of application availability. So throughout the day, they actually go and have a simulated user log on, launch all the relevant applications across all of their locations, across the 20 different states. And anytime an application doesn't launch or there's slowness, an alert is sent back to IT so that they can go ahead and address the issue. Now they have visibility and can proactively go after and identify if there is poor performance before any of their clinicians are even impacted. And in fact, they did this and they were able to prevent an outage for over 12,000 users one time, because they got an alert early in the morning that one of their nursing applications was down. IT was able to get in there, fix the issue, and everyone was none the wiser. And so being able to really test this application availability is critical to make sure that you keep end users productive, and really allows you as an IT admin to save significant time, because you're now not under the gun to rush and fix something because people have come to you and you found out maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours after it's happened. Instead, you're not only proactively alerted there's an issue, but you're also giving empirical evidence and data on exactly what caused the issue so you can resolve it quickly. And Yemi, that's really what I'd love you to show, is to identify what kind of information can we provide so you can solve this very quickly and ensure that the impact to end users are negligible.
Absolutely, Stacy. And I think before I jump into the technology and talk a little bit about this particular customer, I wanted to sort of put up a slide here to show the deployment of this technology. So this is typically how it's deployed, where you have your Goliath set server or your Goliath sort of central console, and then you have these little locations, or typically there's a small piece of technology that is deployed on a virtual machine or a workstation at each of the different sites that you want to be launching the applications from. So it's almost like sending an admin there that is going to be logging on and launching these applications 24/7, 365. So this is sort of the example. This is sort of the deployment architecture that this health system used. But however, they had about 30 different locations spanning 21 states. So if you can imagine, it would be a lot more complicated than this particular view. So to give you some perspective as to what's actually taking place from these different locations that they're actually launching these applications from, I have a quick video here showing what we call this technology, which is the Application Availability Monitor, actually launching a Cerner session. So from one of these locations, it's able to, the technology is able to open up a web browser to the NetScaler store page, accept any security statements, and then log in the same way an end user would. It's able to navigate the storefront page if it needs, of course, after it confirms that it loads, and then start launching these applications. So it's going to launch an application, make sure there's a successful presentation, log out, and then launch any other applications as needed. So this can happen, in the background, 24/7. You don't have to sort of do any additional scripting or anything like that, of course. This is all sort of UI-based configuration. And once there is an issue, once you've identified an issue, you've gotten an alert saying that there is an issue, you can then analyze each one of the launches from the technology here, which is the Application Availability Analysis tab. Now, this tab is really broken down into two sections. There's the top section that gives you sort of a high-level dashboard of all of the launches taking place across the entire environment. So you can see here the blue bars would represent the average launch times. And then the yellow trend line here at the top, this is going to be the overall availability. So out of 100%, how available are these resources or these applications that you're launching in your environment? Now, the bottom section, this is actually where you would go if there's a failure. There's an issue with a particular page or a particular launch. You've gotten an alert, and now you want to analyze it. So you can see here the date and time of the launch, the application or desktop that was being launched in here. And this is an actual sort of customer Cerner environment. You can see the different Cerner applications, SurgeNet, PowerChart, FirstNet. You can see where the launches were taking place from. And you can now see whether or not the launches were successful or if they failed. And if they did fail, you'll actually see at which stage it failed, giving you an idea of where exactly in the infrastructure, where exactly in that entire logon process, some of these issues are taking place from. You can even drill in and get some more information. Now, this is an actual customer environment, so I'm not going to show the screenshot. So I'll flip over to one where I actually can, and you can then see, identify a failure here. You can click on this magnifying glass icon. What you now get are screenshots of each stage of the process up until the launch or the error message or the screen that the users would potentially see in the case of a failure like this. So in this case, you're able to identify, okay, look, this application is not launching, but it is enumerating on the storefront. The log on to the NetScaler or something like that seems okay. So maybe we need to take a look at some of the rest of the technology, identify why there was in this case, connection failure or outage causing a problem. So this allows you to, number one, get an early warning system or sort of a defense perimeter with the alerting capability, so you can get ahead of these issues. You can know about them before users are impacted. You now also get screenshots, so you're getting out of the business of relying on users to report these sort of issues and explain what they see on the screen and take a screenshot of their page. You're getting out of that business, and you're now you have the ability to anticipate and ultimately solve the issues before users are actually impacted. And that's actually what this health system was able to do. Similar to this screenshot here, they had an application that just wouldn't launch. And they were able to get ahead of it. You know, they were able to get alerted to it at about 4:30 in the morning, and they were able to get ahead of it and prevent about 20,000 users from seeing these sort of issues and ultimately impacting the patient care. So with that, I'll pass it over to Stacy so that we can wrap up.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. And I have one slide here I'm going to talk through a little bit on the deployment, because this is a question that always comes up. But having said that, please do submit any additional questions you may have in the question box. I do have a few that have come in. In terms of deployment, one of the questions we always get is, this sounds great, but how hard is it to implement? I recognize many of you on the phone today have probably just gone through a significant upheaval of your plans, trying to get support for more remote workers, getting the visibility. The good news is what you just saw from Yemi is very lightweight to get up and running in your environment. We have turnkey services that can get you up and running in less than 2 hours. We have very focused training that will ensure that you can leverage our out-of-the-box reports, box alerts. We have documentation that will walk you through troubleshooting scenarios so that you can quickly isolate root cause and have impact on your organization. And maybe most important, I mentioned this early on, it is the embedded intelligence and automation that comes with the tool that will allow you to automate a lot of this, so that it is as if you've hired 2 additional people to support your team. And that's just by putting the software in. So with that, I am going to go ahead and, Yemi, we've got a few questions. One of the first questions that came in is, have you ever been able to prove that it was a home user's Wi-Fi connection that was root cause of a poor session performance?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is something that, our technology pretty much is purpose built to do. And I can flip back over to the technology and point to exactly how we're able to do that in a number of different environments. So let me jump back here into the product. So as we talked about in the log on duration case study, when you pull up to the technology, and I can go back for a second, when you pull this section up in the technology, which is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Session Display, this is where you would go to try and troubleshoot that sort of issue, right? A user's calling in and complaining about some sort of slowness in the environment. You want to identify if it is an issue with the network or their home office, or is it something with the Citrix infrastructure? Once you identify their session, you click down on the session. And again, you get a pop-up of all of these tabs breaking down everything that went into their session. Typically, the first stop there would be to take a look at this summary tab, which breaks down their round trip time, which allows you to confirm whether or not they're having a problem or not. You hear this user is having sustained latency over 350 milliseconds. It's definitely even hitting up to 400 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds in some instances. So we can say with some pretty good certainty that this user is actually having a problem. And now we want to identify if it's a network issue or it's a resource issue. Well, the first thing that we'll do is look here at the network latency. This is real-time network latency, not a ping-based or ICMP-based, network latency. This is something we're getting from the ICA protocol itself. So what this tells us is whether or not poor network performance is actually the driving factor to that high round trip time. And we can easily see that here because the network latency looks like it comprises of, the round trip time looks like it comprises of mostly network latency. So we can actually, based on these 2 charts alone, we can rule out that there's a resource problem or a host problem causing an issue for this user. It is something with the network. And then drilling further, right? The network, that's very vague, right? How do we identify what pieces of the environment are impacting this user's network? Then we can look here at this bottom metric. This is connection speed. This is the amount of bandwidth available for receiver or the workspace app at this user's location. So this is ultimately basically their download speed at their home office or at their, at a particular hospital location or something like that. And what you can see here is this user has really poor connection speed. We're talking about as low as 1 kilobit or 1 megabit per second as far as connection speed, which really isn't enough to have any sort of productive session within Citrix. So in this case, we're able to prove, okay, it is this user's Wi-Fi connection at his home office or at his location that's actually causing the slowness for this user. Hopefully that was able to answer the question.
Thanks, Yemi. So the next question that came up is, how is this different from some of the free tools like Citrix Director?
That's a good question, and that's one that we get a lot as well, right? How does this differ from Citrix Director? And we actually have a slide that sort of breaks that down a little bit, so I'll flip over to that. And so we talk about the differences. It really can be broken down into two things. Number one is visibility. So if you look in the middle of the screen here, these components that are not red are basically the things that Director is going to monitor. And we actually got this this image directly from Citrix. And Director does a really good job of monitoring these components, however, or proving that these components are not the issue. However, we all know that there are a lot more things that impact user experience outside of Citrix. And in order to come up with those answers as to what's causing a problem or how to improve the environment, we need to have that visibility into the endpoints, into the applications, into the virtual infrastructure, those back-end systems, as well as the networks and the user devices. So what you see here, all here on the screen, is what Goliath is going to be monitoring to give you that end-to-end visibility. And then the final thing is historical data, right? To understand, okay, what has changed in the environment that caused these issues, as well as being able to report and document these things over time. So those are the two major things that I would point out as being the difference between Goliath and some of these free tools that are out there.
So next question, what metrics can you alert on, and can you customize thresholds?
That's a really good question as well. So as we mentioned, we have over 350 monitoring rules that we deploy into your environment on implementation. These monitoring rules, and I have a sort of little page here that I can sort of scroll through. They're going to be monitoring for different conditions, failure points, thresholds, events, and things like that. So whether those are Citrix-specific alerts or VMware alerts, Windows perfmon, or even down to the event logs. So we're monitoring all of these things, and we can alert, adjust thresholds, and even sort of bubble some of these things up to different tools as well. So, you know, we have, as I mentioned, over 350 monitoring rules right out of the box that we deploy into your environment. It's sort of from a combination of many sources to be able to tell you if you're having a problem before users are actually impacted by those problems.
Yemi, with that answer, we had a follow-up question, which said, you've shown a lot of alerts. Can these alerts be sent to other tools? We use ServiceNow.
Oh, absolutely. That's one way that a number of our customers leverage the technology. These can be sent up to different tools, leveraging different methods as well. So, of course, you know, when we're talking about an enterprise monitoring solution, it is sort of pivotal that it has those capabilities.
And last question, unless any others come in, is how do you collect average logon speed and latency?
Yeah, we typically get that because, you know, people want to understand how do you get their bandwidth and their latency from their locations. So we do collect information in a number of different ways, but specifically, you know, when we're talking about the logon duration details, as well as some of the latency metrics that we collect, it really goes down to our integration with Citrix and our lightweight intelligent agent. So we're actually able to integrate with the ICA protocol. And because the ICA protocol is in constant communication with the endpoint machine, which would be Citrix Receiver, the Workspace app, and the VDA machine, we're able to sort of tap into that and just pull in some of the metrics and some of the information that it is collecting on its own. So that's how we're able to leverage, or we're able to collect and pull in all of these information into the technology, because the ICA protocol is measuring these things automatically anyway to be able to deliver a better experience to the users, and we just pull that information and display it in our technology.
All right, Yemi, that was the last question. So Yemi, thank you so much for responding to all those and showcasing the software. I'd like to thank everyone that is on the phone today. If what you have seen you believe can provide value in your organization, please do contact us at techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com. We're happy to set you up with a free trial, or we can also do a custom consultation/demo for you and understand how some of this data, metrics, and visibility can impact you and your organization. I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you again.